our top story, that trade war between the U.S. and Canada.
Consumers don't want to have U.S. products anymore. They will just stop offering those U.S. products.
North America is facing a trade shock so severe that economists warn it could destabilize the economic architecture that has supported both nations for more than 3 decades. The newest round of tariffs imposed by the United States on Canadian goods has triggered an immediate and highly calculated countermeasure from Ottawa, transforming what once looked like routine policy adjustments into a confrontation that threatens the future of regional industry. The consequences are spreading rapidly across the automotive sector, an industry that supports more than 1.6 million jobs and relies on a cross-border supply chain that functions with almost no margin for disruption. Canada currently supplies more than 1/2 of the aluminum used in American factories, more than 2/5 of the steel essential to vehicle production, and nearly all refined nickel used in electric vehicle batteries. According to data from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, even a moderate tightening of these material flows could lift American manufacturing costs by double-digit percentages, straining both businesses and consumers at a moment when the global economy is still struggling with high interest rates and subdued growth. This conflict is no longer simply a disagreement over trade policy. It is becoming a test of whether the United States can maintain control over a critical industrial base under mounting geopolitical pressure. And as serious as the situation already appears, there is a deeper strategic risk emerging, one that could turn this trade war into a historic economic rupture. The details of that risk are coming next, and they may shock even longtime observers. The escalation now unfolding between the United States and Canada is being driven by a rapid chain of policy decisions that have produced immediate and measurable economic consequences. In a move that stunned trade analysts, Washington introduced a new set of import duties that sharply increase the cost of Canadian industrial inputs, consumer goods, and specialized components. The scale of these duties places them among the most forceful tariff actions taken by the United States in recent decades, signaling a dramatic departure from years of relatively stable cross-border trade. Canada responded with a level of precision designed to create maximum political and economic pressure. Electric vehicles assembled in the United States were assigned matching import duties. Spirits produced in Kentucky and citrus products from Florida were targeted specifically because of their significance in politically influential states. Even more consequential were the new restrictions placed on the export of nickel, lithium, and cobalt, which are indispensable for electric vehicle battery production. Internal assessments within Ottawa indicate that nearly 3/4 of electric vehicles manufactured in the United States rely on at least one of these critical minerals sourced from Canada. The repercussions for the electric vehicle sector were immediate. Tesla, which depends heavily on Canadian aluminum, nickel, and recycled lithium from facilities in Quebec, now faces a potential spike in production expenses. Industry researchers estimate that the cost of assembling a Tesla Model Y could rise by an additional $1,450 to $2,200 United States dollars if access to these materials becomes constrained. Such an increase would ripple outward across the entire electric vehicle market, raising retail prices and weakening adoption at a time when consumers are already hesitant due to high interest rates. The broader automotive supply chain is under even greater strain. A typical vehicle assembled in North America can cross the United States-Canada border more than 7 times before completion, creating a system that depends entirely on uninterrupted logistics. Data from the organization Internationale des Constructeurs d'Automobiles shows that nearly 1/3 of components used in Detroit originate in Ontario. Elevated steel prices, which have climbed by nearly 1/5 in recent months, are already lifting the cost of trucks and sport utility vehicles. Manufacturers including General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis have issued internal advisories warning that prolonged tariff conditions could force production cuts within the next 6 to 12 months. The numbers paint an unmistakable picture. The economic architecture that supports North American manufacturing is absorbing pressure it was never designed to withstand. And yet, the most destabilizing phase of this confrontation has not even begun. Analysts caution that a far more consequential disruption is approaching, one that could shift the entire trajectory of the conflict. The nature of that disruption will be revealed in the next section. The political consequences of the escalating trade war are now reaching some of the most electorally sensitive regions of the United States, creating pressure that Washington can no longer ignore. States that will likely determine the outcome of the next national election are confronting rising economic instability, and every sign suggests that the strain will intensify if the confrontation with Canada continues. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, three states that collectively hold enormous influence in determining presidential outcomes, are experiencing mounting stress across their industrial economies. More than 210,000 jobs tied directly to vehicle manufacturing and parts production are now exposed to heightened uncertainty. As assembly plants confront rising input costs and delayed shipments, managers are being forced to scale back shifts or increase operational expenditures, both of which feed into voter frustration. Households in these regions are acutely sensitive to fluctuations in vehicle prices, employment stability, and manufacturing output, making the current environment politically volatile. This economic pressure is reshaping attitudes within Congress. Lawmakers who previously supported a hardline tariff posture are facing growing resistance from business groups, trade associations, and local officials who warn that extended friction with Canada could inflict long-term harm on regional competitiveness. Several legislators from the Midwest have already requested internal impact assessments, signaling that bipartisan support for the current policy approach may begin to fracture. At the same time, Canada is demonstrating a deep understanding of America's political geography. The decision to target bourbon from Kentucky and citrus products from Florida was not incidental. These goods come from states that hold considerable sway in national policymaking. Kentucky, with its influential lawmakers, is especially sensitive to disruptions in agricultural and beverage exports. Florida, a perennial swing state, reacts strongly to rising consumer prices due to its demographic diversity and economic reliance on food imports. By striking sectors tied to these regions, Canada is applying political pressure with surgical precision. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has emphasized publicly that these retaliatory measures are meant to defend national sovereignty, but privately, analysts note that they are equally designed to force Washington into a political calculation. Canadian officials understand that if voters in pivotal states begin to experience tangible economic discomfort, the United States government may face intense pressure to reconsider its broader tariff strategy. Diplomatic observers warn that this phase of the conflict represents a turning point. If political tensions within the United States continue to build, the trajectory of the trade war could shift abruptly, either toward negotiation or further escalation. But according to confidential assessments circulating among several international policy institutes, the most destabilizing political shock has not yet occurred. And when it does, it could redefine the entire balance of power in North America. The details of that impending shock will be exposed in the next section. The economic strain generated by the trade confrontation is now radiating through the industrial core of the United States, producing cost pressures that businesses and households are increasingly unable to absorb. What began as an effort to strengthen domestic production has instead triggered a wave of financial instability that is reshaping corporate strategy, reducing consumer confidence, and altering the economic outlook for millions of American families. Manufacturers across the country are reporting dramatic increases in the cost of essential materials. Steel prices have surged by a range between 18% and 24%. Aluminum, a foundational input for both conventional and electric vehicles, has risen between 12% and 17%. Components tied specifically to electric vehicle production are climbing between 9% and 15% as supply uncertainty intensifies. According to analysis from Edmunds, these combined pressures could push the average sticker price of a new vehicle in the United States higher by roughly 1,800 United States dollars. These escalating costs are forcing major producers to reevaluate production schedules, pricing strategies, and hiring plans. Companies that once operated with predictable margins are experiencing volatility reminiscent of recessionary periods. Several large automakers have quietly initiated internal reviews to determine how long they can endure elevated input prices before more severe measures, such as workforce reductions or temporary plant shutdowns, become unavoidable. Consumers are feeling the consequences even more directly. Rising vehicle prices are suppressing demand, with first-quarter purchasing activity falling by approximately 6%, according to data from Cox Automotive. Fuel markets, already sensitive to global fluctuations, are now experiencing additional volatility due to the heightened risk that Canadian energy supplies could be disrupted. For families in suburban and rural areas who rely heavily on personal transportation, these price swings erode disposable income and reduce long-term financial stability. Labor markets in manufacturing-dependent states are beginning to show signs of stress. Economists estimate that as many as 45,000 jobs could be at risk if the trade war extends for a full year. These potential losses would not only weaken regional economies, but also place additional strain on social services, municipal budgets, and local business ecosystems that depend on stable employment. The broader societal implications are equally concerning. Higher living costs combined with reduced job security risk widening existing inequality gaps, particularly in regions where industry serves as the backbone of community life. Financial planners warn that households already burdened by rising interest rates may face a compounding cycle of debt accumulation if economic conditions deteriorate further. Yet, despite the mounting evidence of economic fragility, analysts caution that the forces shaping this downturn are not limited to material prices or declining consumer demand. According to several confidential economic projections, there is a deeper structural threat emerging, one that could accelerate the downturn with extraordinary speed, if triggered. The identity of that threat will be revealed in the next section, and it may represent the most destabilizing scenario of the entire trade conflict. As the trade confrontation continues to intensify, the international response is beginning to reshape global economic alignments in ways that could outlast the dispute itself. Countries across Asia and Europe are reassessing their strategic positions, exploiting new opportunities, and preparing for the possibility that North America may no longer function as the stable economic anchor it has been for decades. China has been among the fastest to react. Recognizing the widening rift between the United States and Canada, Beijing is moving swiftly to strengthen its commercial footprint in the region. Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers are expanding exports into the Canadian market, capitalizing on consumer demand that may face higher prices for American-made vehicles. At the same time, Chinese state-backed enterprises have signaled an interest in deeper investments in Canadian nickel and lithium mining. These minerals are essential for battery production, and greater access would allow China to enhance its influence over global electric vehicle supply chains. This strategic pivot serves two purposes. It allows China to fill the economic vacuum created by North American instability, and it weakens the ability of the United States to maintain dominance in one of the most important industries of the 21st century. If these investments proceed, China could leverage its expanded resource access to increase its share of the North American electric vehicle market, further challenging United States technological leadership. Europe is responding with equal concern, though through different mechanisms. Leaders in Germany and France, both of whom oversee advanced manufacturing economies tightly integrated into the global economy, are warning that the widening trade rift in North America risks accelerating worldwide economic fragmentation. European Union officials are now exploring strategies to increase imports of Canadian minerals to reduce dependence on both the United States and China. This reflects a growing belief in Brussels that a more diversified supply chain is essential for long-term resilience. European automakers are also reassessing their investment strategies. Several firms are evaluating whether production capacity should be shifted away from regions vulnerable to tariff volatility. Such decisions, if implemented, could weaken transatlantic industrial ties that have supported high-value manufacturing for generations. What is becoming increasingly clear is that international actors are preparing for a future where economic power is redistributed among multiple competing blocs. And according to several high-level diplomatic reports, the most decisive shift may occur not in Europe or Asia, but from a strategic advantage that Canada has yet to deploy, one that could fundamentally alter the global balance surrounding the United States. That revelation comes next, and it may be the most consequential twist of the entire conflict. Behind the visible tariffs and retaliatory measures lies a deeper layer of strategic leverage that could redefine the long-term balance of power in North America. For years, Canada has quietly held one of the most consequential economic tools available to any United States trading partner: control over a substantial share of the energy that keeps the American economy functioning. While Ottawa has not activated this option, the mere possibility is enough to unsettle energy analysts and policymakers across Washington. Canada currently supplies a majority of the crude oil imported into the United States, a significant portion of its natural gas, and a meaningful share of electricity transmitted across the North Interconnect. If Canada were to reduce these flows even modestly, energy markets in the United States could experience unprecedented volatility. Several independent studies estimate that a temporary reduction in Canadian oil shipments could lift American fuel prices by a range between 35% and 50% within a matter of weeks. For households, such an increase would be financially punishing. For industries dependent on transportation and logistics, it could be destabilizing. And for the political climate, it could be explosive. Canada's energy leverage extends beyond raw supply. By adjusting export volumes strategically, Ottawa could influence futures markets, shift global pricing benchmarks, and accelerate investment toward non-United States suppliers. Even the threat of such action would place pressure on Washington during negotiations, giving Canada a bargaining position it has rarely used but always possessed. At the same time, the United States faces a separate long-term risk: diminishing influence within the global economy. If trade tensions persist, supply chains that have anchored American industrial strength for decades may begin to migrate toward regions perceived as more predictable. Already, discussions are underway among European and Asian companies about diversifying production away from the United States to avoid tariff exposure and policy uncertainty. Should this trend accelerate, it could weaken the country's ability to shape international trade norms. Canada, for its part, is actively expanding diplomatic and commercial ties with Europe and Asia. Increased mineral cooperation with the European Union, joint ventures in battery production with Asian partners, and exploratory agreements with Indo-Pacific economies all signal a future in which Canada functions as an independent global actor rather than a secondary player within a United States-centered economic system. These shifts could erode Washington's negotiating power within institutions such as the World Trade Organization, where influence often correlates with stable alliances and reliable market access. The emerging reality is stark. The longer the trade war continues, the more the strategic advantage tilts away from the United States. Canada gains flexibility, new partners, and global credibility, while the United States faces rising costs, political divisions, and declining international trust. But according to several senior economic analysts, the most consequential question has not yet been addressed, a question that could determine whether the United States preserves its economic leadership or enters a period of historic decline. That question will be confronted in the final section, and its implications may redefine the future of North America. North America's automotive sector is now standing at a historic turning point, with consequences that extend far beyond vehicle assembly lines. What began as a targeted tariff dispute has evolved into a complex economic confrontation, exposing vulnerabilities that many policymakers in Washington underestimated. The interconnected structure of the region's manufacturing base means that every new measure introduced in this trade war carries repercussions that move swiftly through factories, labor markets, and consumer prices. The longer the conflict continues, the clearer it becomes that the United States may bear deeper and more lasting costs than initially projected. Although Washington intended to strengthen its commercial position, the cumulative effect of rising material costs, declining purchasing power, and heightened political pressure is undermining that goal. Tariffs designed to protect domestic industry have, in practice, raised the cost of doing business, placed strain on millions of workers, and intensified voter dissatisfaction across several critical states. These pressures challenge not only economic planning, but also the broader confidence that anchors investor behavior and long-term industrial strategy. Canada, meanwhile, is leveraging its position with increasing sophistication, reinforcing partnerships abroad, and demonstrating an ability to influence negotiations without sacrificing economic stability. This evolving dynamic raises a profound strategic question that policymakers, analysts, and citizens will all need to confront. Is this a bold strategy or a risky mistake for the United States? The trajectory of this conflict will shape the future of North American competitiveness for years to come. Understanding the stakes and the potential outcomes is essential for anyone following global economic shifts. Subscribe for more fact-based global analysis and stay informed as this story continues to unfold.